So initially I didn't want to make a video like this, but because a lot of people seemed triggered by my most recent ones, I've changed my mind and I'm making this video just to piss you guys off. What a great guy I am. By the way, this is not a black pill video at all, so I really recommend watching all the way until the end so that you do not miss any of the context. Alright, so I wanted to start off by saying that I've been relatively active this year. I haven't been to like this many events, but still 7 YCSs as well as 1 NAWCQ, so it's a little more than average. And the only moments where I felt like I had a lot of fun but also a huge control over most of my games in terms of technical play were at YCS Lille as well as YCS Mexico City. At YCS Lille, I was fortunate to only have 2 uncontrollable losses in total. My top 4 I actually could have won if I knew how to beat the plan deck, so yeah, that's 100% my fault. At YCS Mexico City, I lost twice in Swiss as well, with the first one being completely unfortunate in my favor, and the second one being to the combination of Ash called by and Crossout. Yeah, that's where it all started. However, the more I think about my top 16 match, the more I tell myself that I haven't played exactly perfectly, and I still might have done something about that match in order to maybe win. So to put things into perspective, I had a full Crystron board with Infinity, Dragster, Tristalos, Unicorn, Birth, and Cluster, and I had to give 2 draws to my opponent because I got hit by Molchemy Pearlia and my opponent was playing Memento. So first things first, my opponent used Book of Eclipse, which I actually negated with FE Don Dragster, thinking that my Cyber Dragon Infinity was a more valuable negate because it can also negate monster effects, so obviously why use the Omni negate when I can just use the Spell and Trap negate to just negate a spell or trap card? Well, I did get punished hard since when I used the Dragster, my opponent chained Forbidden Droplet to send the Book of Eclipse on the field as well as a monster from the hand in order to negate the Dragster as well as whatever else on the field so that the Book of Eclipse resolves and then flips everything face down, which screws me over because now the Kashtira Birth is useless since the Kashtira Unicorn is face down, and obviously if my opponent used Memento Fusion, I lose the game on the spot because there is nothing to banish, so yeah, it's obviously a really good interruption against them and I no longer have them. I think you can see where this is going, but if I made the read that my opponent had Forbidden Droplet, I should have negated the Book of Eclipse with Cyber Dragon Infinity instead of you negating it with FA Don Dragster. The difference here is that if I use Cyber Dragon Infinity to negate the Book of Eclipse and if I get hit by Forbidden Droplet afterwards, I can't chain Crystron Cluster in order to destroy my own Infinity, and then obviously Infinity still resolves because it is not negated by Forbidden Droplet, which means that Book of Eclipse does not resolve and my monsters are not flipped face down. Obviously, this doesn't work if I negate Eclipse with Dragster since it has to successfully lose 2 levels in order to negate a spell or trap card, so I can't self-destruct with Cluster. So yeah, this would have made my board a little more oppressive because obviously I would not be losing my Kashtira Unicorn and Birth and everything, which means that I'd be applying a little more pressure. And again, it does matter because on top of Eclipse and Droplet, my opponent also had Tatsuno Toshigo and Bone Party, so winning felt a little impossible there. And honestly, this is exactly what I love the most about Yu-Gi-Oh! You know, the ability to like look at your past games and really reflect upon what could have been done differently, even if that sometimes implies that you gotta make an unorthodox counter-intuitive play. And I say this because the other 2 losses that I had in the other top cut matches were completely uncontrollable in terms of technical play at least. Because of the fact that it's always the exact same non-engine cards being played as the format has been pretty much the same ever since December, deck building is a little too simple right now. I think we can all agree on the fact that people will always have different philosophies on how they want to build their deck, but the core 90+% remains the same for pretty much every single deck out there. You know, for example, in the Malice deck list, I'm not really seeing too many differences between each deck list because, you know, the concept is the same, but only certain ratios would be different or certain tech cards would not be the same. But like, I have yet to see anything crazy innovative from like Reizul Mitsurugi or Malice. It's usually always the exact same thing, and also the winning deck lists are pretty boring and overall very basic. It's not necessarily something that I'm a big fan of because I think deck building is supposed to be the ultimate skill expression in Yu-Gi-Oh! So obviously it became a little too simple over the years, which means that there's a lot of skill that kind of just disappeared from Yu-Gi-Oh! Over the years. The game isn't fun when it is dictated by non-engine because obviously that's something that every deck can do, so it makes your deck feels way less unique. And obviously it's even worse when a deck can play like 23 non-engine with a bunch of 1-card starters, and obviously I'm really looking at decks like Malice right now. And it's even worse when the deck actually has consistency issues and they still manage to go like undefeated or something, because then you just ask yourself, bro, like how lucky did you have to get? Honestly, right now I feel like it's really hard to be impressed by someone who plays a basic deck list, but who either wins all the dice rolls and doesn't brick, or, you know, draws all the hand traps going second and actually resolves them. Yeah, couldn't be me. But yeah, still, everything that I said applies to me too, which is why I do not believe I would have deserved to do well with Reizul Mitsurugi, because that is the deck that I played at YCS Rhode Island. I don't see the edge when hand traps largely define who gets to play and who doesn't. It really does create a dynamic where most games feel like hand comparison until someone throws. But like going second into a full board is completely impossible nowadays, and sometimes even the half boards can be extremely tough to manage if they're backed up with non-engine. I think hand traps have been the main culprit of this dynamic, as they've justified the proliferation of one-card combos that can play an absurd amount of hand traps. If hand traps didn't exist the way they exist now, Konami wouldn't really be forced to create decks that can play like 20 non-engine and like 17 one-card starters. I already know I'm gonna have a bunch of rage bait comments of people saying that called by, cross out, and talent are the perfect solution to this problem. But the thing is, look at this. These cards are only fair if the top decks are fair and can be beaten with board breakers, and in other words, if hand traps are not really a necessity. So the thing is, when Call by the Grave was a 3 in like the Sky Striker, Orchest, and Salamangreat format back in 2019, you know, the card was good, but it wasn't like insane because you didn't really have to play hand traps, you know, like back in the days you could play, you know, a lot of engine cards, or you could play like a board breaker approach, and it was completely fine because, you know, the top decks weren't really degenerate. So even though Call by the Grave was a 3 of, potentially, if you wanted to, most people didn't really feel the need to actually play the card in the first place. But now there's a really good reason why cards like Call by the Grave, Cross Out, and Talent are at 1, and that's because they were completely unfair, since they stop the only things that can really stop you when you're going first and when you already have a massive advantage to begin with. These cards really feel like a cheat code that make the game even more brain dead than it already is by nullifying interaction completely. Because again, right now when you're going first, your goal is not really to have like a healthy back and forth with your opponent. You're really trying to make an unbreakable board that just FTKs the crap out of everyone. Except for me, obviously. I'm a Crystron player, so I actually do pretty reasonable things. Now, I'm not like the only exception to the rule, but still. Obviously, I'm the MVP, Crystron best deck, right? Anyways, the reason why hand traps are a complete necessity right now is because decks nowadays are way too layered and way too oppressive. It's not like you're only making interruptions on the board where like a single Dark Ruler or like even a combination of Dark Ruler and Evenly can beat you. No. Now it's completely different. People can search hand traps or, you know, turbo out floodgates or hand loop you like with Evil Swarm Ouroboros, which is very stupid. And yeah, I mean, there's like interruptions in the hand, field, graveyard, you lose cards from your hand. Like, what is this? Board breakers are like the epitome of fairness and interaction, since you're actually letting your opponent play the game so that you can break your opponent board and actually interact in a really unique way, because board breakers are typically not super easy to use. Like very often, like the best timing to use a card like Forbidden Droplet is not like first action on main phase, but rather as you are breaking the board, which is not something that most people have really mastered. And also cards like Forbidden Droplet can also be used to kind of dodge Droll and Logbird, which is another really unique interaction. But yeah, with board breakers, everybody gets to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Because the player going first actually gets to, you know, do the combo, and then going second, you also get to play Yu-Gi-Oh! By making the board less degenerate, so you might actually have a chance. But yeah, the solution right now is either to make an unbreakable board and to stop the opponent from playing, or hand trap the opponent to death and also stop him from playing. Again, like I said, we can blame cards like Evil Storm Ouroboros, Arch Nemesis Protos, Harpy's Featherstorm, and also a bunch of other cards for the situation we are in right now. Now, I already know a lot of casual players enjoy the current format, but at the same time, that is to be expected, since whenever there are losers, there's also winners. I don't think you're weird necessarily for thinking that the format is good, I just think you are extremely weird. Nah, I'm just kidding, whatever, you can do whatever you want. But yeah, I know for a fact that I've said at the very start of the year that I wasn't a big fan of like the Razor and Malice format. I never really changed my mind on it, even though I have seen quite a lot of success, I guess, relatively speaking. So it's not really me making like a random 180 out of salt. But again, I cannot complain at all. This is by far the best year of my life, especially since I managed to do so well with Crystron out of every deck, which is, you know, one of my favorite decks of all time. Speaking of which, the deck is going to be so much better when Kinad will come out. Yeah, what a time to be alive. I think Justice Hunters is like exactly what Yu-Gi-Oh! Needed to improve, as the new decks are actually quite interesting. Yummy is the definition of a fair deck that is also extremely good, as it can play a lot of starters, a lot of non-engine, but it is extremely technical and has a lot of exploitable weaknesses. I'm not gonna go over it too much in detail in this video, but let's just say that cards like Ghost Reaper or Contact C or Power Filter, they just completely wipe the floor with the deck. Dragon Tail is a really good low to the ground kind of deck and is very reminiscent to Despia, kind of like a Despia that can play hand traps, which is not really Despia, but it does have the drawback of not being able to play spells and traps too much because it needs a lot of monsters in order to fuse. And then K9 based decks are extremely good into hand traps because the K9 engine really punishes the opponent for hand trapping you, and it has cool synergy with decks that run level 5 monsters such as Vanquish Soul and Crystron, and look at that, both of these decks are top tier decks in the OCG right now. I think if we were to destroy the current existing decks and ban lingering floodgates, including a preemptive hit to Paradise Smasher, we'd already be in a better spot than we are right now. Again, a bunch of people are gonna bitch about this in the comments, saying how fair and healthy cards like Protos and Featherstorm and Paradise Smasher are. I already know it. I swear to God, some people exist just to troll. It's crazy. But yeah, I mean, for the game to become better, we need to stop creating one-card combo decks that can play infinite hand traps and just focus on 2 to 3 card combo decks instead. That way, comboing off actually feels unique, because right now it feels like a joke. Also, board breakers have to be equally as worth playing as hand traps, because right now you're just getting destroyed if you're playing board breakers instead of hand traps, unless you're extremely lucky. I'll eventually make a full in-depth video on the Justice Hunter Avengers format soon enough, so stay tuned. Also, I plan on taking YouTube really seriously now because I've been slacking by only making 2 daily videos because I've been a little overwhelmed these past couple of weeks or months. Anyways, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know how you think Yu-Gi-Oh! Can improve in the comment section below. I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.